This is the Klimas & Klimas new blending board. It's designed to make it easy to card your wool and place it without any effort so that you can make perfect Rolags and get an exceptional fiber preparation for woolen spinning. It comes flat, and for travel you have the keel with a screw, and you have 2 screw places in the back of the board. The board's made of cherry. It has an 11-inch tall and wide deep carding cloth, so you can make both thin and thick Rolags. The top of the board is where the handle is for ease of use. Let's put it together and I'll show you how to use it. If you're really tall, you might want to use the upper screw if the length between your hip and your knee is long. In my case, I'm not very tall. I use the lower hole. Now, you don't want to tighten it. You want it just snug enough so that you can pivot, because you're going to utilize that pivot for ease of use. Okay. When I set it, the keel goes between my knees. And I want to make it easy on the shoulder, and so you do too. You want to place the top of the board where it's going to be easiest for you to stroke fiber across, or a brush across, or a carder across. If it is straight out in front of you, then you're brushing across and you're not going to get your fiber in well. So whatever your motion is best, and see here I'm not using any shoulder, it's a very easy motion. So that's how I'm going to set up my board. Applying the fiber to the carding board is very simple. I'm going to start with the most basic method. I take just some nice top and I place it on the board, kind of just going to make stripes, nice and even. And now I'm going to do a green stripe. You don't have to prep your top in any way. And I want it almost overlapping. I don't want any gaps. And, oh, I got it a little thin there. I can just place a little more fiber by brushing it on. Notice I don't have to card anything. It's kind of laying on top. I want it to stay there. So I can use a stiff paintbrush. Here's an old boar bristle brush. Works very nice also. If I was doing a tiny stripe, I could use a tiny paintbrush. Oh, this one's not stiff enough. We want stiff. This is a Resolve brush. It also packs it in very nicely. If I was going to do the whole board at once, I might want to use a wallpaper brush. So let's continue to put our stripes on. We can do wide stripes, thin stripes, but the key is we can repeat these. Now notice I have a gap here, so I'm going to widen it a bit and make sure I have no gap. And then I see I missed some there, so I'm going to put a little of the bright green back where it belongs. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to put in a magenta stripe. Now, of course, I don't consider this exactly the design I would desire, but I'm doing it for effect for you to see what can be done. Because the real design factor is where you place your fiber, the texture of your fiber. You don't have to just use top. You can use all sorts of other fiber and fiber preparations, and we'll show you that. So you can brush as you go, or you can place your fiber all the way across. Now, how much fiber do you want? Well, that will depend greatly on how big a Rolag do you want. Are you going to be spinning a thick woolen? And this is for woolen preparation. You're going to be spinning a thin woolen? Now, notice I've got a bump here. It doesn't matter. We're doing a woolen. The fiber doesn't have to lay perfectly straight. Matter of fact, in a lot of woolen preparations, we don't want the fiber to lay straight. But when we're making stripes, all I care about is that it's in the position I want. So it's easier to lay it on straight. So I have fiber all the way across, and this is the brush I particularly like. Now, I want to make sure I've packed it evenly. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That looks pretty good. I see a little gap here in the magenta. So I'm going to come back and put a little bit more. I see a little bit of a gap here in the teal. So those are areas I'm going to add just a tad more. Till I look across and I don't see any of the blue carding cloth. It's all full. I could pack more on, and it's perfectly acceptable. At this point, I can either brush it all in, or I'm ready to make my Rolex. How do I make my Rolex? My fiber's prepared. Notice I did no carding. I just took my fiber and applied it to the board and brushed it in. It's not saying you can't card. And notice also how I have swiveled at times when I want a little bit angled to make it easier for me to apply. That's why I left the keel loose. I use a dowel, and I like to have an assortment of dowels. My favorite dowel is about this diameter, and this is a little long, but you see this is a little short. We really want it to stick out about 2 inches on either side. Go to the hardware store, get a 1/4 inch or a 3/8 inch. I think this is a 3/8 inch. You might prefer a larger one or an even finer dowel. I like an assortment according to what I'm going to make. If I have a very short fiber, I'm going to use a very fine dowel. So I have a selection, as I have a selection of brushes. This is the fun part. This is where we start our Rolag. First, I put my dowel at the end of the teeth, and any fiber hanging over, and these were long stapled fibers, so I have a lot hanging over. I bend them back over the stick, over my dowel, and I brush them in. Now, I'm smoothing in the direction of the teeth so it doesn't catch my hands at all. Then I pick up and I give a little tug and I roll. And I give a little tug and I roll. And at first it's a little loose, but I keep working on it. And the first Roleg, everybody says, is always the toughest. And once you get the technique, it's not any issue. And I didn't get it into the teeth enough. So what I want to do is just make sure I get it into the teeth. And I roll. And what I'm shooting for is a nice, tight, consistent Roleg. I do this part. There we go. I do the tug, and so I'm pulling off about a fiber's length. And then I roll it on the board, and I have my stripes, and then I simply slide it off the board. I have so much fiber on here, I'll probably get 5 or 6 Rolegs across. And the more meticulous you are, of course, the better your pattern will be. Now notice how easy this next Roleg rolls nice and tight. Nice long Rolegs for spinning perfect woolen. Now, when our fiber is into the teeth too much, I might use a brush just to pick up, because I don't want to pick into it with my fingers. I don't want to puncture anything. Of course, if you use carding cloth and raw wool, you should always be current on your tetanus shot. That really, this is more the roll leg I want. Nice and tight and even. Okay, I want to see you do that on your hand carder. Oh, I took it off on the right. There's actually a nap to the wood. And it's kind of like those Chinese finger games. If you get them on too tight, it wants to stick. So there we go. Start my next roll lag. Notice how nicely the colors stay separate as you roll these off. Makes a really fun color breaks. You can do them evenly, you can space them, patterns. You're going to decide your design. I'm going to teach you the technique. Notice how clean this cloth is. I have clumps left in here from another project because I didn't clean this first because these are demonstrations. Okay, I've already got 5. Six, and a final. If you want your pattern to be even, you want about the same amount of fiber coming off on each roll leg. My first 2 were a little thick, but they're actually about the same weight. They're just not quite as tight, so they'll be a little more difficult to spin a really smooth woolen. So now we have quite a few roll legs ready to go.